Hello and welcome to a retrospective video of sorts, my look back on the 20th anniversary of one of my all-time favorite movies, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. And where do I start? Where do I even begin to start with a film like this? I love this poster first and foremost, by the way. I had this on my bedroom wall for a long time, maybe until the Two Towers poster came out, I suppose, but it's one of my all-time favorite posters, I think. There's nothing particularly remarkable about it, but it has a lot of nostalgia for me, I suppose. I just love that cover and poster. So, I just made a video talking about the 20th anniversary of Harry Potter, and the two go hand in hand in terms of remembering the year in which they came out, because it was this incredible Christmas, winter period for genre film fans, or at least fantasy film fans, and fantasy book fans who got to see, the kind of novels that they loved in kind of film form on the big screen. It was just, for me, it was Harry Potter was the big thing because I loved those books. Lord of the Rings, I had no knowledge of, but it was still a big deal. I remember it being talked about a lot online. The fact that it was a trilogy, the fact that it was this guy, Peter Jackson, making it. And I'd seen one of his previous films, Heavenly Creatures, when I was far too young to see it, and it kind of traumatized me. But I remember thinking, that guy, that's interesting. And it was being made in New Zealand, and it was, it felt like something different. It didn't feel like a big Hollywood production, even though it looked like one. And I was very much aware of that at the time. But also it was just something in the air in terms of this being a really big film that people should pay attention to and go and see in the cinema. And around that time, I just started going to the pictures by myself. It was, I don't know when it came out, actually. Maybe I should check out the date, because it would give me a better idea of when exactly that was. Not that it really matters. But the first film I ever went to see in the cinema on my own when I was 13 years old was Steven Spielberg's AI. And I don't know when that came out. I think maybe like late 2001. Because I hadn't been going to the cinema on my own that much. But this was kind of a seminal film for me, because it was like the first time where I thought, I just decided I'm going to go see this on my own. Because that kind of summer, when I moved back to Wales, I started, here we go, to 21st of September. So that's basically a few months before, where was it? United Kingdom, 21st September. So I was kind of primed for Lord of the Rings, and I guess with Harry Potter going on my dad was, I don't know why that was preferable, but Lord of the Rings I went to see on my own. So I moved to Wales in 2001, and I'd been deprived of the cinema for 5 years. I used to go a lot in the early 90s with my nan, a couple of times with my dad. And then 96, I moved to England, and there was no cinema near me. The nearest cinema was in Salisbury. And I'd never been there, and I still have never been to Salisbury before. And whenever people would talk about where I lived, it was like, oh, he lives in Salisbury, even though I didn't really. But it was like the closest place that people vaguely knew of. So I never went there, never saw anything in the cinema for about 5 years. Maybe occasionally when I went back to Wales on holiday, but not much. Like I remember going to see Godzilla maybe. But there wasn't really, I like Star Wars, Phantom Menace, never got to go see it in the cinema, even though I was dying to, so I had to miss out on quite a lot. And then 2001, summer, moved back to Wales, and I went to, there was a new cinema that opened in Cardiff called the UGC at the time. It's now called Cineworld, and it was this new building, and it was really exciting. Me and my friends went there on the weekend on a Saturday, and it was like £3 for a ticket, and we were just like, I remember being in the bathroom, and it was like all like a new build and everything, and it was like really, everything was clean and fresh, and we were just like in the toilets after whatever film we watched, going like, we could do this every week. All we need is £5, and we've got like train ticket, cinema, like it just seemed like they were giving away cinema tickets at £3, and we were really excited about it. But they didn't like going all the time. I wanted to go every week. And so Lord of the Rings, or AI I should say, I went to see on my own. I sat front row, and it was just this, like, I was almost like looking at like, am I allowed to do this? And so it was a liberating thing going to the cinema on my own, and I love doing that. I love going with other people as well, but there's pros and cons to both. But I decided, I guess, I was going to go see Lord of the Rings, and no one else wanted to go see it with me, so I went on my own. And I don't remember sitting in the cinema watching it. Like some movies I have those snapshots I have snapshots of Return of the King and Two Towers, but not Fellowship of the Ring. But I vividly remember getting home from seeing Fellowship of the Ring. But, so it was like a big thing, and, the trailers were really exciting. And I had never read the books. My first frame of reference for Lord of the Rings was seeing a school friend. I wasn't even a friend of them, but one of the kids in my class in primary school had the book one day, and I just remember seeing like a ring and some trees and the Lord of the Rings. I knew nothing about it, but it kind of grabbed me. But it was such a thick book that I never really dove into it or anything. So I had very, very little knowledge on what the story actually was. So going to see the film and just being blown away by it, basically, and feeling emotionally like moved by it as well by the end. Like it just was like a whole massive world that I'd never considered before, and it was so exciting. And around that time, my nan got me the cassette tapes of the audio drama of the first book, Fellowship of the Ring. So it was a BBC radio drama, radio play of Lord of the Rings. Ian Holm plays Frodo in those audio dramas. I don't know when they were done, maybe the 70s. And I loved that audio drama so much. And I never finished it. And I still haven't. And I those first like 3 episodes where like they're still like in the Shire. I love them so much. There's like even listening to them now, like the theme music at the beginning, like there's, I can't even do it, but there's like a little kind of like creepy sting at the beginning, and it's like dun 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 dun, and it still creeps me out and puts the hair on the back of my neck go up, because it's just like, I don't know, it's like an exciting kind of fear, even though the book doesn't give me that and the movies don't give me that, but the audio drama, that little like creepy sting at the beginning is like really exciting, and ooh, and I just I love that radio drama. And I could just never get to the end of it. I always get to like when they get to the mountains near Moria, and I never finish it. Maybe one day I should really do that and kind of work my way through them. I think they're on YouTube now, but I love that audio drama. And then the book was a big one for me because my nan bought me the movie tie-in version, where it was a paperback, massively thick paperback of all 3 books. And it had on the front was the riders, the Nazgul. And it's kind of an image from the Fellowship of the Ring with the waves coming in, and so she got me that for Christmas. And I was like, oh my god, it's like all 3 books in one. And I read the first book and I loved it, and skipped some of the songs and the poems, but really enjoyed it. And I could never get into Two Towers, so it wasn't until I was like about 22, 23, 24 that I actually sat down and read the whole thing. It took me about 4 or 5 months. I read it every day in work. So that was like my ritual. So I have my 30-minute break, get some food, read Lord of the Rings. And it's an incredible book. And even then, I still skip some of the kind of songs and stuff. So one day I'd like to do a full kind of complete read through, even the appendices, which I've never read. So I do love the books, and I think it's an incredible story. So richly and beautifully told by Tolkien. And the movie really adapts that well. Having now read all the books, I can really see how faithful they were, but also molded it to kind of an exciting movie at the same time. So my memory of coming out of the cinema was getting home, and before I even went back to my nan and granddad's where I lived at the time, I went to W.H. Smith straight away, went into the bookshop and looked at the Two Towers and Return of the King on the shelf. And I looked on the back of the books. I wanted to know what happened in them, not in terms of spoiling myself, but I wanted what's the next movie going to be about if there's 3 movies in total. And the back of the book was so vague. It was like Frodo and Sam continue their journey to Mordor, and then Return of the King is like Frodo and Sam conclude their journey to Mordor, and I'm like, that's it. And like my 13-year-old brain very irrationally thought that the next 2 movies were just going to be Sam and Frodo just like trudging their way through like the environment, because the end of Fellowship of the Ring, and I still think watching it today, Mordor looks very close. Like they're looking up and you can see the mountain and the kind of the red thunder. And it looks like they're going to get there in a couple of days. And obviously it takes a lot longer than that. And there's a lot more in between where they are at that point in the story, like physically and geographically. But I suppose it just gives you a visual kind of, this is where they're going, I suppose. And I guess when you look at it, you can kind of figure in where certain things are, I suppose. And maybe round the mountain there's a bit more to get through to Mordor. But I just remember thinking, well, they're nearly there now, so what the hell is the other 2 movies going to be about? But it worked out pretty well in terms of like how good those stories are going to be, and how much excitement was going to be had in the movies with seeing the trilogy completed. And my memories of seeing Two Towers was mainly a drunk guy getting kicked out, and me feeling like this proper rush of adrenaline when Theoden gets brought back to normality, and then like when Gandalf comes down the hill at the end at Helm's Deep, and just feeling that like electricity and like the goosebumps, like, oh, awesome. And then Return of the King, I went to see it with my nan, and I remember feeling like it was just a bit too overwhelming for her. Not in terms of that she was old or anything, because she wasn't really that old at the time, but very loud and, you know, a lot going on, I suppose. And I don't think she'd seen the other two movies, but I just remember a big rock boulder getting thrown in the battle at the end, and me feeling overwhelmed. And it's always been my least favorite of the three up until the last time we watched all three of them, which was about 8 years ago. Me and Connie did the complete extended edition trilogy all in one go, and it takes a lot out of you, but it was an incredible experience, and that's the only time I've really appreciated how great Return of the King is in the context of just watching it all in one go. And it's been many years since we've been able to do that, and again, I can't even begin to imagine when we'd have the time to do that again. But what I wanted to do for this anniversary was to go back to the origins, to the theatrical version of the film, the one that I loved so much when I first saw it. I didn't finish recollecting there. I went to the bookshop, read the synopsis, and then went home to my nan and granddad's, and I remember vividly lying on the sofa, looking at the Christmas tree. It was still light outside. I could see the beach down over the edge of the hills, because we lived up on this kind of cliff top overlooking the beach and the pier. And I just remember feeling like depressed and down because I had to wait a year to see the next one. With Harry Potter, it was like, yeah, I can't wait to see Chamber of the Secrets next year, but I knew what happened. There was no suspense about what would happen next in the story. And I didn't feel like reading the book first before seeing the next Lord of the Rings movie. But also I was just really like, you know, emotionally drained by it. Like I just was so taken up in the high fantasy of it, the excitement, the heart of it, you know, feeling the deaths of Boromir and Gandalf. And I didn't know that Gandalf came back. So I was very excited when I saw the first trailer for the Two Towers and he's there, and I'm like, holy shit. You know, so that was exciting for me to see that in the trailer. But you know, I felt like they built up those characters so well, and I loved going, and I love road movies, and I would almost class Fellowship of the Ring as a road movie, because they're pretty much constantly, from the Shire onwards, it's constantly moving forward. I guess all three of them are in a way, but really the first one, and you get that core group together, the Fellowship, and there's like so many different kind of dynamics between all of them, and it's so fun to watch. It's such a great cast. The you know, where they shot everything in New Zealand, you really feel a palpable sense of like, this is real almost. And I love Peter Jackson's kind of mission statement when they first started making those movies, where he said to the cast, and mainly the crew, I think was the main kind of, maybe it was only the crew, but he was saying to the people who are like going to be responsible for building this world, the production designers, the art designers, the visual effects guys, he said, we're going to treat this like Lord of the Rings is non-fiction. You know, Lord of the Rings, it really happened, and we've been given the great honor and the privilege of going to the real locations where all this stuff happened and filming there. So we have to treat it with that level of respect. And, you know, looking back on it now and looking at the trilogy, the Fellowship has always stood out to me, and it's because it was that special first-time viewing of being blown away by the world and being so excited to see it again. There was, like, kids in school, there was, like, rumors of, like, someone had a tape of it, like a pirate copy, and I was just, like, you know, I was almost like, you could just give me the pirate copy of Lord of the Rings on VHS, and I could just end my life there, because it would never get as good again, because I was just like, oh, but I could watch the Lord of the Rings at home. Like, it was such an exciting prospect, because I just loved it so much. And it wasn't, I don't know how I felt about going to see a movie again in the cinema at the time, but I'm sure with Christmas money I could have gone again in January, but I never did. And I was just really excited to see it at home and to be able to just watch all my favorite scenes and have it on while I went to sleep and all that kind of stuff. I was just so excited for it, hoping that there'd be good extras in the DVD. Little did I know that, you know, within a year I'd have potentially the best set of special features ever put together. So yeah, the excitement was, and it was almost more special than Harry Potter, because I wasn't expecting it as much, and I wasn't as invested going into the movie. And I was so spirited away by it, you know, to use that phrase. I really was. I loved that film and the world so much. And all the actors, and the music was incredible. The music's a big part of that trilogy, I think. And one memory I have when the Return of the King came out was my mum got me the game. I think it was it? I don't know if the game was called Return of the King. It might have been. because there was another one called The Two Towers. I think it was Return of the King on the GameCube, and there's like the menu screen is inside this like white tomb or something in Minas Tirith, and it has the kind of the Rohan theme that's very, very grand, like fucking haunting and mournful piece of music, and it plays in the menu of that game, and it just made me really sad. I remember like being in the menu and like I gotta get out of this menu and just kill some orcs because it's just making me really sad, and not because of the movies. Like I just felt like, and this is my own psychology, I was really like touched that my mum had bought me this game for Christmas, even though she always buys me these presents. And it was just something about that piece of music that spoke to me as something so melancholy. And it made me appreciate the things that my mum had done for me as a single mother. That's not that's not the desired effect of that piece of music, and I'm sure it didn't have that effect on anyone else in the world. But for me, I know when I hear that piece of music, I feel something very deep and special. And it started with the menu music of that game. So the music of Howard Shore's, and then the Hobbiton theme, whatever you want to call it, the music you hear when you first get to the Shire is one of the most beautiful pieces of music I've ever heard. So, it's just an amazing marriage of so many different elements. And even for the time, the special effects are pretty damn great. So revisiting the film, I want to go back to the source, go back to the theatrical cut, which I don't think I have watched since maybe like 2002 when the DVD came out, the normal regular 2-disc DVD, before the extended cut came out in December or November, like late 2002. So I was looking, and I know that the 4K set they just came out with last year has the theatrical and the extended cut. So the big gold box I have here with the extended versions of the films, they don't have the theatrical ones. And so I want to watch it in high definition. But I couldn't justify spending £60 right before Christmas on a box set just so I could watch one film from it. And I was also kind of disappointed with the fact that they didn't include all the extras. There's a lot of things I could talk about with that 4K release of Lord of the Rings, and I'm also skeptical of some of the enhancements Peter Jackson's made to the transfers, and there's a lot of talk about that. But I was kind of on the fence about what to do, and ultimately I decided just to buy the kind of the old... it's a reissue of the original Blu-ray that was originally put out by Entertainment Video, or Entertainment in Video, and this is a re-release from Warner Brothers, because they kind of, I guess, bought New Line at some point. I'm pretty sure that the Hobbit movies were kind of a Warner Brothers New Line thing. I'm not entirely sure, but so this is a reissue, but it's the first transfer that came out on Blu-ray of this movie. And looking online, it looks different to the extended cut Blu-ray. Like the colors look different. Certain shots look sharper. Certain shots don't look as good. So just from a transfer point of view, I was interested to see this, but I also wanted to just see the theatrical version of the film again. And I'd like to maybe check. I don't know if I'll be bothered to do this, but I think that the extended cut looks better on Blu-ray because certain shots in this version, like characters, like the kind of the lighting on them didn't seem to match with some of the digital backgrounds. So I don't know whether they cleaned it up a bit with the extended version or whether this is just a washed out transfer for high definition. I don't know. But I could see some of the seams around the edges, while still so much of it really held up as well. And the colors do look different than the extended cut, so there was just an intrigue about having a different version of the film visually. But watching the theatrical version, immediately it felt rushed. It was like, oh, we're just skipping over that. And I almost wasn't even aware of things that we were skipping, but it was like, it feels like they're rushing through this to get to the next bit. But, it was nice to not have to carve out 3.5, 4 hours to watch the film and just have 2 hours and 45 minutes or whatever it is without the credits. But going back to it was as great as ever, and it's so many of the moments kind of play in your mind before they arrive on screen. And I just, I actually, two things I remember from seeing Fellowship in the cinema, they've just come to me. So I do have vague memories. I remember jumping in my seat with the brilliant cuts. Gandalf, this is going to be a night to remember. For the fireworks go. I remember jumping in the seat, or jolting. And then I remember when Merry and Pippin set off the firework and Gandalf looks down at them and he grabs him by the ears, and then it cuts to them washing dishes. And right when it cuts to them washing dishes, I saw the little kind of the kind of sprocket hole or the cigarette burn or whatever it is on the print of the film. I remember seeing that in the top right hand corner of the thing, and kind of I don't know if I heard it or I felt the kind of like the like the feeling of like the real changing over. I was very conscious of that during the shot of the dishes being washed. So I remember that wildly. That's such a specific detail, but I remember noticing, oh, that's where they changed the reel. So yeah, and going back to it now, it's one of my all-time favorite films, and it's just brilliant. It really, it's almost like I've seen it too much, maybe, even though it's been a while since I've gone back to them. But it's another series of films that I really hope that my children in the future would enjoy. That's something my cousin's partner, and she has a couple of kids, two boys. He was telling me that he was sitting down with his oldest son to watch Lord of the Rings, and he's like, it's so magical to see it through their eyes, and that's an experience I really hope to have one day, because I love the films, but I love the first one, and I have always kind of felt this without expressing it or even thinking about it consciously. Viggo Mortensen nailed it right on the head for me. He was giving an interview and he was talking about how, for him, with the first Lord of the Rings movie, there's just, and I'm completely paraphrasing here, but the gist of what he was saying was that there was something a bit more, not sacred, but a bit more authentic with Fellowship of the Ring, because that was a film where a lot of location stuff, a lot of practical effects and things, and once that film became such a huge success, they go back and they do reshoots for Two Towers, and they kind of finish that up. They do the same with Return of the King, and he feels like, that a lot of the digital effects became so much more prominent in Two Towers and Return of the King that you kind of lose a little bit of that magic from the Fellowship of the Ring, and I completely agree with that. And then he also added, and with the Hobbit movies, it's like that, but to the 10th degree. Like it's just expanded in terms of like feeling like you're not really there. And I know that they did a lot of like location stuff for the Hobbit movies, but I can absolutely understand that. And I have my gripes with the Hobbit movies, but I do love them. I love all 6 of the films, but all 5 of the other movies to me kind of pale in comparison to the first one, because there is the special nostalgia surrounding it, but it is a film unlike anything else in terms of, just seeing Hobbiton as an actual physical location, like the amount of effort that went into that alone. And you just have so many great, and they call them in the behind the scenes bigatures. They're miniatures, but they're fucking massive. And so when you get in these incredible shots where the camera's panning down, Orthanc down into like the pits and stuff, and most of it is real, and it's just, and you can tell that it's real, and you can almost reach out and touch it, and you can see all the incredible work that's gone into it. And there's only a few ropey bits of, digital doubles and things like that, whereas in the Two Towers already, it's like, right, let's just get Legolas kind of flipping around onto a horse and just do it all digital, and I don't think that Two Towers or Return of the King suffer all that much with an overabundance of CGI, but they definitely feel more extravagant. And I actually feel like, in general, Peter Jackson's downfall as a director, I want to say downfall is a bit dramatic, but one of the cons to his filmmaking style for me is that from Fellowship of the Ring onwards, it just seems to be he dives more and more into what can I do with the technology, not how can the story be helped by the technology, and even to the Beatles documentary, which was phenomenal, but he totally jumped the shark with what he did with the footage, and it just seemed because I can, and I think that you lose something when you tinker with it that much. But this isn't to throw shade on the trilogy. I love the trilogy, and every time I watch Two Towers, Return of the King, I go, wow, these are fucking great films, And I almost feel like I kind of hold this one a bit too close to my chest in terms of how much I love it. But it's just, it's the one. It always will be the one. And it's just it's one of the best films ever made, I think. In terms of fantasy storytelling, it's pretty much unparalleled and just as a kind of epic. And it's just such a weird, like, how did that even happen? That this kind of scraggly-haired, kind of barefooted, director from New Zealand convinced a company to give him millions and millions of dollars to make The Lord of the Rings into a trilogy, to film all at once before they'd even release the first movie, and to do it in New Zealand, and to have them do the special effects. Like it was so separated from Hollywood, and it just became this phenomenal success because everything was made with a love for the material, and there's a handcrafted, handmade feel to it, but like expertly so. Just the amount of detail, and you see all that in the behind the scenes stuff, which to me remains the greatest document of the making of a movie, times three. You know, hours and hours worth of stuff. Like, not just, hey, here's how I made the movie. Like, here's like an hour and a half on like the background of Tolkien and, you know, us writing the movie and all the decisions that we made. Here's 4 audio commentaries. You know, they just went mental with the special features. And that was like my film school growing up. And that was like some of my fondest memories of, you know, that time in my life, was just watching and devouring all those special features. And now I just want to go and watch them all over again. It's comfort viewing to watch the behind the scenes of the Lord of the Rings trilogy for me. Even if, you know, in later years I found out that a lot of that stuff was filmed by Costa Boats, I believe was his name, and they kind of took all this footage and did it to their own liking, and he kind of felt a bit shafted by that, which is a real shame. And his films, which were later released, equally brilliant in their fly on the wall kind of approach. But I do love the talking heads incorporated with the kind of the versions they made for the DVDs, the initial extended edition ones. And it's just like, you know, why wouldn't you do that for something so monumental, to just record as much of it as you can and give people a behind the scenes look that they have never really seen before in that kind of detail. So that is part and parcel for me of the enjoyment of the trilogy, is the behind the scenes stuff. But there's still such a wonder to going back to that world in just watching the film again. One thing that was funny to me was you know, the great, you know, it's really great how they condensed the Council of Elrond from like I don't know, 1,000-page chapter in the book. It's so ridiculously long, all this exposition, and they really just got right to the meat of it in the scene in the movie. It's a really good scene. And, you know, it's funny to me when there are like memes about movies. We recently rewatched Titanic a year ago or so, and I was really dreading some of the like meme-worthy moments, like, it's been 84 years and I'm the king of the world and all that stuff. But I found that I was so wrapped up in it that I didn't stop to think about the meme, and I just, you know, I watched it, you know, without any cynicism and a much more kind of earnest viewing. And I hope for that with Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. But, you know, when when Sean Bean is like, it is a gift, you know, Connie's just like, you know, one does not simply walk in. I was like, yeah, okay, all right. So that had to come up. There was no way that was going to come up. And my axe, you know, there's a lot of like funny moments that you can take from the Lord of the Rings. But what was really interesting to me was like, you know, you shall be the Fellowship of the Ring. Great. Where are we going? And then I was so accustomed to the film just ending there that it was almost a shock to me that it continued. I'm like, oh, we're still in the movie, because I only watched the extended version. And with the extended version, that's where the first disc ends. So you have to, you know, the journey continues on disc 2. And I've always hated that. I understand it, and I definitely wouldn't want them to sacrifice bitrate or quality, but it's always bothered me that you have to switch the discs, and it's like a disrupted viewing. Even though when I watch a movie, I'll pause it to go get a snack or whatever, but I don't like the switching of the discs. And I can already hear the, you know, potential Laserdisc owners kind of rolling their sleeve. Motherfucker, we had to switch the disc like 8 times, but I'm just so like attuned to it that it was like, oh, we don't have to switch the disc. We'll just keep on watching, you know. So that was fun, just to kind of carry on watching the film. But then you miss some of those scenes that, you know, I'm so used to in the movie that it felt like a rough cut. It felt like they were just rushing things a little bit. So, you know, for the 20th anniversary, it was nice to go back to the theatrical cut, but I don't think I'll be doing it again anytime soon. Maybe for the 50th anniversary, if I'm even alive then, probably not. You know, it's just one of those things where, well, saying that, I'd only be in my 60s, so I hope I am around for the 50th anniversary of this, but who knows if the world, as we know it, will be even livable by 2051. But yeah, I don't see myself revisiting this anytime soon. I kind of want to watch the special features on this one. I'm kind of sick, if you didn't notice. My voice is a bit hoarse, because I haven't gone back to the special features on the regular release in a long time. But, you know, obviously the extended edition DVD stuff is, the appendices, shall we say, are just unmatched. So anyway, that's pretty much it. I love going back to it. I love this film. And sitting back at the end, you know, I'm glad you're with me, Sam. Or Sam, I'm glad you're with me. And they walk off and the music plays and just the fade to black and directed by Peter Jackson. I just got this swell of like, almost like pride for him, but also just like, God, I can't believe that they did it. You know, the movie's a miracle in a way. You know, they didn't cast massive name stars. I mean, Ian McKellen, you know, absolute legend, you know, Christopher Lee, legend, but it's not like, I mean, you can look at X-Men from 2000, but it's not like Ian McKellen was like one of the biggest movie stars in the world when they made Lord of the Rings. Viggo Mortensen was a working actor, had appeared in Hollywood movies, but he was no big star. And he came in like the last minute, like he literally came in like while they were still filming. You know, it wasn't a cast that was trying to lure people in with big names. It was a cast of the appropriate actors for the parts. And when you cast so well, the movie really holds itself up in a way that that works along with everything else that you're doing well. So I just think that, you know, you could almost imagine a world in which they would try and get Tom Cruise to do this, or, you know, other big name actors to kind of to secure more money to make the film. And it's just a wonder that it got made in the way that it got made. And you think back to the rumors that the Beatles were going to do a Lord of the Rings, and they were going to play all the hobbits, and it was almost a good thing that it took, you know, over half a century for these stories to be made in live action on the big screen, because it just felt right. It felt oddly right that it was made in New Zealand, and you know, it's just, again, it is a miracle, this movie. So I'll leave it there before I just keep waxing lyrical about how great the Fellowship of the Ring is. So many great moments I could just keep talking about and stuff, and this isn't even me reviewing the film, but to go back to it was great, and I just wanted to kind of get a video out talking about it in the year 2021 on the 20th anniversary, and I can't believe that it's been that long. I really can't. And now we're looking down the barrel of a Lord of the Rings Amazon Prime show, and it just doesn't feel the same. You know, I don't feel like you need to try and recapture that, and I'm skeptical and interested at the same time. And the Hobbit movies I enjoyed, but it didn't have the same magic, you know. And even then, I think coming out of Two Towers and Return of the King, they didn't have quite the same. They had the same magic, but not the full 100%. I don't know. There's something about Fellowship of the Ring, and it's always going to be the one I go back to, because it's like it's the nicest movie. It's a really nice, comfy start, you know, and the journey's beginning, and the characters are coming together, and they're going off on the journey, and there's so many great moments, and you know, and when everyone splits off in the Two Towers, it's kind of sad, you know, but there's something really rousing about getting to the end of that film, and you know, Sam saying, "Yeah, you're going. I'm coming with you," and he's like almost drowns himself just to make the point. And then Viggo's like, "We're not letting Merry and Pippin, you know, suffer a bad fate. Let's hunt some orc." And Gimli's like, "Yeah," and it's like fucking, you know, you really get swept up in the kind of the fantasy and the adventure of it. And it kind of it switches so beautifully between funny moments that don't feel forced, moments of great scale and wonder that feel real, you know, and moments of adventure that are filmed against this amazing backdrop of New Zealand that make you feel like Middle Earth just might be real. And I love that about it. And it's just a fantastic film. Thank you for watching. Happy New Year, and I'll see you in the next video in 2022.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you, 'cause